told him, hey, if you leave, you'll lose your place.
Yeah, everywhere. Like you're just.
You're gonna leave.
So he's like, I'll just get as far as I can go and then deal.
Wow.
My sisters were together over President's Day weekend in New York. I don't know if you knew that my older sister is now based in Manhattan again.
Okay.
And
Again.
She was there for like 10 years. She was
Right,
gone
right,
from us
right.
10 years, and then now she's back. And so our younger sister went up to visit and was to fly out on President's Day, which is when massive weather built in there. And then she was not able to leave until Thursday, as opposed to Monday. Just from New York, like to Nashville, in that car. So yeah, that's kind of amazing. Of course, she was there to work remotely as anybody can.
Right.
So it didn't really matter.
That's
And I was like, at least you're still like you are not in Indianapolis. You know, you're at Libby's apartment and getting
yeah, that's
like access to the best food in the earth,
right,
maybe.
right, right. A good scene.
Yeah, totally. Just get to hang out.
Laugh
with
about
her.
it.
Exactly. Which I then also, that prompted me to get in touch with my friend Sarah, who lives in Atlanta, who, when she visited me in Haines, got weathered in. And it was in September. It wasn't even like a crazy time, but there was fog and rain.
I was 7 weather in June a bunch.
Yeah, I was with your sister.
Yeah.
And so, but the flights were backed up and booked, and so it took Sarah 2 days to get home. And as a very urban person living in Atlanta, always having lived in the city, she was just mind-boggled, mind blown by the fact that she could not get out. I was like, well, sometimes the weather actually needs to take control.
I've had really good luck. I've flight fair bit. I've had really, really good luck. God really screwed up back in Chicago in the fall, but other times it's been remarkable actually how long it's been.
Oh, wow, look at that spread.
I think she got feeling through it.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know if you're hungry or if you're, no, this like, yeah. Yeah. Wow, Liz.
Well,
Notice a lot of times it seems like people, they're only so many.
Yeah, and I mean, just wherever you want to be, like,
well, they've got
It's
the
fine if
website,
you're somewhere.
and I'm right here.
right. This is.
We don't have.
Yeah, it's still
Around reading last night, it seemed like, I was sitting next to the computer.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. I'll try
Oh,
to
there's
see.
only one guy watching, so maybe we should
Yeah.
go too much out of our way for him, but.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't, I mean, I can stand in the corner while we go over the business. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
What a beautiful spread.
I know,
Gosh.
the thing of croquetas is just, I
Yes.
just wanna dive my face into it. Well, Rick, hopefully you don't mind, we usually start off with about 15 minutes worth of
No problem, I'm
business, but
I'm easy.
it gives speakers a chance to eat before they, before they speak and then their mouth is monopolized, so.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Yes, that's my Oh, yeah.
It's above like bitter creek. So entry to the building is actually the patio for bitter creek. Patio for the Yeah, exactly, yeah, they're just right across the hall. There's a stage and, there's an architect's office, and bitter creek's business office. Yeah. Yeah. So they're 5 years.
Rick, can we get you some lunch?
Yeah.
Help yourself.
I keep track of it, I'm sure there's some sort of like an equation.
Yeah.
It's okay, you're not gonna take some of these olives.
After you, Rick, the guest of honor.
That is.
It really is. What happens?
If they did, just,
They just sort of lock up.
Where was that from?
It was the sidebar name.
Oh, yeah.
It was all Idaho, it was a local source. So there was trout and hagerman, cheese. Although the cheese, I was like, what does this mean? Seaweeds are cheese, American cheese, domestic cheese. I was like, I'm not sure what that is. I know.
Yeah. Sure. Stick it up there, right? Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever missed one of those ledger sections. It was like, nah, it's not
Yeah.
happening.
I saw your lovely bride.
Oh, thank you.
It was one of those things, I find myself, especially now that I can't drink, you know, like going into those, you're just like,
Okay, whatever.
I just have to do this. And like the best way to do it is just to like
Hi.
walk up, exactly. And it helps to have the name tag, you know? I mean,
A ton.
it's like if I were just attending, it's that much harder. But it's like, well, it's my responsibility to go and do this.
You know,
And I figured that's like the way to make it through.
the funny thing I'll say about it too is I always find them better and more comfortable than I expect them to be.
That was my experience, exactly. That's so interesting you say that. When I left, all of a sudden it was like 7:15. And I thought, I cannot believe I've been here for 2.5 hours.
Right.
And I actually met people, had conversations with people, and now, you know, it's like, wow. Okay.
So our world is so small that the overlap is pretty common.
But I think it went well. It seemed like a good turnout. Courtney
Yeah,
was saying that the bar tab was the exact same as last year. Hey, Lacey, how are you? So that indicated to her that the attendance must have been right on what it had been before. How are you doing? Good. That one's got
To
yeah,
give you a hug.
thank you.
How's the kid look?
Stand up. She's good.
Yeah.
She started walking over the weekend.
No. It's crazy town. That doesn't even seem
I
possible.
know. She's over a year old. She's 14 months old. I know.
Stop.
Right?
I
It
always
happens
feel like
fast.
I don't notice that time is passing until a small child is involved. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, wait.
Wait, I thought that
Major
was like
life
in
stages.
total, right? And like they see this, what we were just discussing, like you, in a child, you really see the differences. It's not like us, where it's like, oh, you cut your hair. It's different than it's been for the last 8 years. Rick Johnson, this is Lacey
Hi.
Randall O'Brien.
I really enjoyed your presentation at the Politics for Lunch with the Anderson.
All right, great.
That was a fantastic presentation.
You know,
You
this will be a
see
little bit of the same, except
Oh,
missing
cool.
the celebrity.
I'm fascinated with it, so I'll be glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
That was a great presentation.
Well, the funny thing about that is the governor and I spent an hour the day before sort of talking about it and scripting, and then as soon as he started talking, he threw that all out the window. Tacked wildly to the left, and I'm just standing there going, whoa.
Where did we get this?
Bill?
I think so.
Well, it was, I never would have guessed that he'd gone outside.
Well, no, he can do it.
See ya.
You too, thanks so much for coming.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah.
Good.
Is it Bass Market?
Yes.
There you go.
See you.
See you, I brought this for you, it's sort of state of the art.
Oh, yeah.
20 years ago, so.
Oh, neat.
You can, I finally got some folks in our library.
That's actually great. Thank
Pick
you.
up an electronic copy for me, so yeah, if for some reason I should look at it, it has any value to you, I have electronically if you want it, but it may just be purely historical now, but thought it might be of interest, given your topic.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign.
I think they might be.
You have heard it? I didn't mean to like.
Elizabeth?
This is my very good friend Megan Carter.
I
Rick
can see you.
Johnson.
There are 4 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, press *#.
Hey guys, this is Elizabeth. We are just milling about, getting lunch and getting organized over here. Who all do we have on the phone?
Hi, I'm April Pope. I just joined from Idaho Ball.
Great.
Catherine Shirley, I just joined in Moscow, Idaho.
Who, I'm sorry, can you say your name again?
Catherine Dilladale.
Oh, great.
Not even.
And then Eric Andes from Salem, Oregon.
Oh, great. Eric, did that Google Hangout work?
I actually didn't get a link. I just called in.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, I should have gone there.
You do. Sorry about that.
Makes me so nervous.
No problem, this one's fine.
Anyone else?
And this is Ty Beer in Washington, D.C.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ty.
You know, it's so icy. So I fell a lot. So my knees are pretty. Finally get down.
All right, we're going to get organized and get together shortly. Thank you, guys.
Sure. And some snowboarder saw me and zoomed in front
How
of
you
me,
doing, Amy?
thinking I had no room. And had not been icy, had there been more snow, and had I been a little bit around my feet, I would have been fine.
Yeah.
And I got in the wall.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Lunch in the same place, like,
Is that
6 years later.
Hide the damage.
Sorry to go back to the last time.
Oh,
I should have figured out when to go to this place.
Yeah.
I want you to.
That's okay. I went to the 3rd floor the first time.
Wow. I took purple tights.
You know, I got the street address and then I had this, you know.
Right.
The name of my address, the directory, no problem. You could do it that way.
Just to get people to go.
Yeah, exactly. It's for hazing, new initiation.
Okay.
Can I take your seat?
I went to the wall.
First come, first to the table, dude.
I know, there's-
No more chairs.
I think, no, and then we can like move it. I know Dylan has it set up to like, but I'm sure we can.
As long as I'm not on.
She's good. She started walking on Saturday.
Did you?
Uh-huh.
No going back.
Right? But she's, it's not her default yet.
Right. She's still doing the crawl and the walk and the crawl.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But she's like,
Yeah, it is.
Awesome.
that's how they did.
Good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. He's
In Idaho, yes, so they're only 4 digits. In Texas, they're like
yeah.
16
He's
digits.
Is that-
really starting to put things together like conceptually. And, it's amazing to watch his online. Starting to put things together. What was it? Kind of poignant things for me
Why?
last week. A couple weeks ago.
When did
I
you
was reading
become
this
my
book,
like extreme friend?
and I was playing the part of
That's
this bear
a
and
friend.
he lost his hat.
That's so sad. He was like stealth extreme.
You know what it was like?
Okay, maybe we'll give
Demonstrated
them a
understood.
Probably
Yeah.
still rolling in a few more minutes and then we can get rolling.
Wow.
It's pretty wild. He's like saying things like,
It's great. Oh, the food is great.
Where's this round from?
Thank you.
The Basque Market,
Fantastic.
they have a great tapas pickup menu.
Wow.
Guess the croqueta should have been the giveaway.
But
It was from the
Well, there's a
back.
couple of places you can get cookies.
That's true.
We're seriously being used.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. they're-
Yes, very much so. I met Kate finally. I don't know if
Aren't you doing?
Mark like connected us via email, and we had. She sent me. I mean, I knew she would be, but it was fun to.
You hadn't met Kate yet.
Really? Mentorship.
I'm just like doubting my number all of a sudden. I know
I do
know
that
my
too.
number. I've never.
I do that too.
I was like, I've
Well, I mean,
never.
I talked to,
I'm sure it's it.
I talked to the guy.
So I'm
Okay.
sure everybody would agree that Kate is the
Solicit
better of
feedback
the two
internally.
givers.
What people want to get out of it.
Not that I don't love Mark, but
She's amazing.
she is amazing.
She
Hard to
strikes me
confuse.
as such.
Finals are nowhere near, so.
Yeah.
She strikes me as such. Just made it all the way around.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Andrea texted and said,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's already 7 after.
yeah,
So go ahead.
awesome. So we can do this? Oh, no one logged in, so it's not.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys all for coming. We're just gonna go over a couple of business type items before we get underway with our awesome speaker, Rick Johnson, who's here to discuss some cool topics with us. The sign-in sheet is here. Make sure you all get a chance to sign in on it. We did circulate last month's meetings with the notice, so I'm sure you all read those with great intrigue. Can we get a motion to approve those unless there's other thoughts that,
I move that we approve the minutes.
I second that motion.
awesome, okay, those minutes are approved. At the last meeting, we also talked about approving a $250 donation to the Environmental Law Society up at U of I. Dylan's worked with the VP of the section up there, Everett Baker, and organized that donation with one move, so I think everything's good to go there. Dylan also has discussed with Everett up at U of I the possibility of a mentorship program that we talked about before. We're still waiting to hear back on that, but Dylan did also reach out to Marie Feldman, who's here with us today, fortunately, just to talk about some of the history of, prior mentoring in this section. So we'll update that, I think, as we hear back from the Environmental Law Society up at U of I. We also briefly discussed last month getting together with the ELS members before our March meeting. Dylan reached out again up there. We haven't heard back yet on interest, so I think at this point we're probably just gonna hold off on moving our meeting and have it at the same time next month. Nick Warden asked that we remind those authors of our advocate article sections that our submissions are due March 11th to the editor for your advocate articles. So to everyone who volunteered with exuberance to do that with Nick, we certainly appreciate it. And please keep that timeline in mind.
And last meeting, I think you said there were 4 submissions. Has anybody else since then chimed in with one? We're still at 4? So that puts more pressure on me to actually finish the one I said.
It's engaging. Good news, we have managed to organize our next couple of CLEs. Next month, we're gonna have a gal down in Utah talk about a sage-grouse article that she wrote. Andrea's helped put that together. It sounds exciting. And this gal also has a counterpart who visits Boise regularly to talk about the ESA and other related issues. Joe Leckie from the PUC is rescheduled to talk to us in April. Hopefully we can remind him of that meeting and get him here. In May, Dylan has secured Ilana Rubel to do a legislative recap for us, which should be pretty great. And then I think we'll take the summer off as we tend to do, and go from there.
One of the things Alex sent an email about is that we need to coordinate elections pretty soon. So to the extent that folks want to serve on the council or as officers, then
Yes, certainly
keep that in mind.
mind.
And I think we basically do that by email.
Right.
That was
No, that's great, thank you. Anything else?
Oh,
Okay, well, Marie has reached out to Rick Johnson for us, and we're all very excited. She'll tell us what he's gonna do.
Introduction.
Yeah, please.
So I am pleased that Rick Johnson, the Executive Director of the Idaho Conservation League, is able to be here with us today. He is not just the director of ICL, he's my ultimate boss as well. So, but I'm very pleased to introduce him to you all and you all to him, because he creates a wonderful work environment, and I'm really fortunate to get to work over there at ICL. Rick, I'm going to do just sort of a brief background bio. Grew up on the East Coast and went to school in upstate New York and moved out here in 1979. And you moved to Sun Valley, Rick? Is that where you came? Yeah, when you first arrived. And he actually worked for ICL back in the 80s and worked out of Sun Valley. ICL, as you may or may not know, we have our headquarters here in Boise. We have a Ketchum office and then an office in Sandpoint, although all of that was not in place at that time. But Rick worked for ICL for several years, and actually, in fact, in 1984, started working on protection for the Boulder White Cloud Mountains as a wilderness area. And you may have noted that that is part of his, or the Boulder White Cloud Mountains and wilderness versus national monument designations and what those mean are the topic today. So he's been working on that. We're now in the 31st year of his advocacy. So that should give us all
An indication of my.
Perseverance, right? Yeah, or an indication of all sorts of things I'm sure we can all discuss and maybe have a conversation about here in a little bit. But in the intervening years, he actually moved to Seattle and went to work for the Sierra Club, where he worked on one of the I don't know exactly how to characterize it. I'm sure you know how to characterize it. But he worked on the issue of protections for the northern spotted owl, one of the great environmental controversies of the century, actually, or since the ESA was established. So he worked for the Sierra Club for 8 years, is that correct? And then moved back to Idaho in order to become the executive director of the Idaho Conservation League, and he is now celebrating his 20th year in that role. And we have grown and grown, and my position a few years ago, being able to be on staff there, is an example of how ICL has grown and gotten stronger over the years. And yes, and we're having our 42nd year this year. So without further ado, Rick Johnson, thank you everyone for being here.
It's a pleasure to appear. It's always interesting for somebody that took his LSATs and considered a little bit law school to be in a position where you listening to me gives you a CLE, or at least part of one. I'm not always entertaining when it happens. It used to be that it was about when I'd be talking about the spotted owl stuff that was once part of my life. And that was really where I decided that I was never going to go to law school, because I had the ability to hire really good lawyers instead. And, what happened then is that the depth, I consider that sort of my graduate school in politics. And there's the law, and then there's politics, and politics often creates law, but they're really different. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today relates to law, certainly, but it mostly relates to politics. And that's what I suppose has kept it interesting for me. But anyway, I've been asked to talk about the Boulder White Clouds and the Wilderness Bill and the monument, and that's a relatively easy thing for me to do. What is difficult for me to do is do it in a short amount of time. It's been a long story. But before I dive into it, it really is about two different proposals, two different laws, the politics of the moment. But before I get into it, I do want to set the tone with a little bit of discussion of the place, because the place is actually what matters. The place is what got me into it. It's the place that got Cecil Anderson into it. It's the place actually that got Mike Simpson ultimately into it, and as invested as he is. Boulder White Clouds are truly one of the great places of Idaho, and one of the things that's unique about it is you don't really see it from the road. When you're driving up into the Sawtooth Valley, you see the Sawtooth Mountains and all their grandeur, but what you don't realize is there's actually a larger constellation of wild country behind you when you're standing there looking at the Sawtooths. And the White Clouds are particularly unique. They are constructed of a different geology. The limestone composition in the mountains creates a more receptive water for bugs, which means the trout fishing is a little richer and a little bit more productive in the lakes. It also then flows down into the East Fork of the Salmon River. Much of the White Clouds is about the East Fork of the Salmon. The entire watershed of the East Fork is captured in this constellation of ranges. And that is the highest elevation salmon and steelhead spawning habitat on the planet. It is a very unique ecosystem in that sense, but it is also unique in its geology. It has had a world-class molybdenum deposit at the base of Castle Peak that became of great interest in the late 60s. Asarco Mining was proposing a very large, which would have then been the world's largest open pit molybdenum mine. The plans for Asarco is that they would have this huge thing on Castle Peak, make this giant lake, and it would be a great recreation center for the people of Idaho. But that obviously never happened. And the reason it didn't happen is because of a governor's election in 1970, where Cecil Andrus, for the first time as Western governor, was elected largely around an environmental issue. And that had happened really nowhere in the American West at this point, the Intermountain West. It happened in California, but not the interior West. It captured the eye of a fellow freshman governor from that same time, Jimmy Carter from Georgia, and he made Cecil Andrus his Secretary of Interior, all based around the activities around the White Clouds. Greetings.
We're a little late. We had the wrong conference.
But anyway, the greatest conservation achievements in our country, in many respects, in my view anyway, as a wilderness advocate, is the Alaska Lands Act. I would trace that to Cecil Andrus and the election of Jimmy Carter, which again, I trace back to that same mountain in the White Clouds. So one of the challenges of the White Clouds efforts today is it has become a symbol for something a lot bigger. There has not been a wilderness bill for national forest lands in the state of Idaho to pass since Frank Church was a senator. It's important to recognize that we pass wilderness bills with some regularity back there, wild and scenic bills as well. 64 Wilderness Act, 1968 Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, 1970 Craters of the Moon, 1972 the creation of the Sawtooth NRA, 1975 Gospel Hump, 1978 Hell's Canyon, and 1980 the Frank Church River No Return. An incredible run of history, incredible run of success, and yet for national forest lands, nothing has happened since then. And the White Clouds are poised to be that place. The Oahe.
For those on the phone, can you please mute your phones? We're getting a lot of feedback on our end.
There you go.
We're gonna take your time on it, but it's an iPhone, turn your car.
Can you, but they can still mute it. The mute still works.
The mute for your iPhone is found right next to the keyboard. It's a scary thing where I'm providing CLE. So anyway, in the
Maybe turn the volume.
Yeah.
So in the history of the Boulder White Clouds, there are a couple of personalities. I've already mentioned Cecil Andrus in the importance that has been part of. And for me, this has been a professional journey as well as a personal one. One of that is most remarkable for me is the time that I've spent with Cecil Andrus, particularly in the last couple of years. The Idaho Humanities Council, I believe, is coming out with a book relatively shortly, that will open with an interview that I did with Cecil Andrus. So a lot of the history of this is all the more richer for me because of the time I've spent with Cecil recently. But also, and actually more significantly, is the time I've spent with Mike Simpson. Mike Simpson once told me that his idea of a wilderness experience is when his golf ball gets caught in the rough. And when we started working together, now 12 years ago on the White Clouds, that was literally his idea of a wilderness experience. He wasn't joking. Since then, nearly every year, he has spent some portion of the August recess when Congress shuts down in the White Clouds. There's some years he spent more time there than I do. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, while I'm not totally doing backflips over the bill he's about ready to introduce, probably tomorrow, nevertheless, I believe that his wilderness ethic and his love for the place is as great as anyone. And I would pair it with Cecil Anders. I mean, it's really remarkable, the evolution of Mike Simpson through this issue. I would also say that the evolution of myself is probably no less significant. Because of all that time of working with a conservative Republican to try to create a law in Idaho, working through the U.S. Congress, and you know, I would not be kidding you to suggest that, you know, I probably speak to his chief of staff 3 or 4 times a week, and that has been true for almost 12 years. This is a lot of time. It's a lot of time. In my Spotted Owl days, I rode around on the Clinton Gore campaign bus. I lobbied Congress 100 days a year. I've never had a relationship with a member of Congress as close as I do with Mike Simpson. And I think that's really a special thing about Idaho. And this is a special place, but it's about special people too. So we've been working for 12 years to try to put together a package that we can move through the U.S. Congress. And when Mike Simpson first started the process, it wasn't about wilderness. It wasn't about protecting the place. It was about solving problems. And so when he first put together his draft of a bill for the White Clouds, it included provisions for ranchers. It included provisions for motorized recreation. It included provisions for the county, particularly Custer County. And it included provisions for the conservationists. And his goal was to give each of those 4 interests just enough that they would not worry about what the other interests got, which was sound politics at the time. And at in the moment, he had a really good shot at getting it done. But one of the challenges, I think, with politics and with law in D.C. is the longer it sits around, the more it collects, in the vernacular, flies. And everybody starts picking at it. Mike Simpson's bill was initially stopped by the left, by my previously close colleagues on the national conservation groups. The Sierra Club, for instance, opposed it very strongly in the beginning because it was working with a conservative Republican. There were concessions in there. So my old employer opposed it. I was on national TV once talking about this, and he said, well, Mr. Johnson, you're a very politically oriented, seem to be politically savvy fellow. Where'd you learn all that? I said, I learned it working for the Sierra Club, the organization that opposes me right now. So anyway, that was interesting. In the time that went by, the left stopped us at one point when the Democrats were in control of the House. And then later it turned into that the right stopped us when the Tea Party ascension really began. And there was just that we're not going to allow any of this stuff to happen. And each one of those moments, each one of those times, and we had a time where this bill was ready to be passed on the tax extender bill in literally the last hours of the U.S. Congress in a lame duck session, and the defeated speaker, Denny Hastert, took it out of the bill at 1 in the morning and didn't tell anybody except the clerk. And the next morning when it popped up on the internet, that section had been replaced by a giveaway he was giving to a medical company in his district. It was so egregious that on the very first day of the next Congress, they chucked it. But that was the closest we've ever gotten. But anyway, we've had this long wilderness process, and the key thing is not necessarily the details of it at this particular point, but that the relationship was serious. It was very, very hard fought, a lot of working back and forth, a lot of compromise on the environmental side, a lot of compromise on other sides. But what happened is Simpson got increasingly distant from some of the stakeholders as things turned more to the right, as the Tea Party got, if Custer County can get more extreme, they have, so it just became more and more difficult for him to move forward. In 2010, Cecil Anders, when he was speaking to our membership, did a very strong speech where he said, with all due respect for the work you have done, you need to get out of that, and you need to start working with the Obama administration to move a national monument. I know about this. he does as Secretary of Interior. He was moving national monuments all across Alaska, and what he did there was create the catalyst that became the Alaska Lands Act. He forced the Alaska delegation to the table. There were some legal dynamics in the moment that required action before 1980 that are a little different here. Notwithstanding, Cecil Anderson knows a lot about the Antiquities Act. He knows what you can do. And he had the backup of a very aggressive president to do that. So anyway, Anders was pitching us. We waited another year and a half to work through that at current Congress. We felt it would be it'd be bad faith to switch our horses with the congressmen, with the delegation, until that Congress ended. After the 2012 election, moving into 2013, we actually said to the delegation, we are now working on a national monument effort. So no surprises, talked to the delegation. A number of members of the delegation said that totally makes sense to us. We understand why you're frustrated. You're advocates. You've worked in good faith with the delegation, and you haven't been able to get across the line. So we acknowledge what you're up to. That said, not surprisingly, over the last year and a half or so, the work on the monument, and if you get a bunch of environmentalists together and you get us down on the table with the maps and we start drawing lines, we have a tendency to draw the lines expansively. And the effort that we did with Simpson was a political process where we were working within his constraints as a conservative Republican. In this case, we were working with my constraints. Well, I don't have constraints. So we've drawn a boundary for the monument quite expansively. And the key point, the takeaway about that is we have a monument proposal that is before the administration. It has been well received. It is a little more controversial at home because it is so much bigger than the Simpson bill and because it encompasses a variety of different values, or in the terminology of the Antiquities Act, a set of objects that is broader than would just be applied to wilderness in the Wilderness Act. It is a broader set of values that include the salmon and steelhead, the mountain goats, the migratory elk species, your variety of big game species, but also the historic mining, the historic values of Livingston Mill and Boulder City and some of the cool old history that is part of this place. I would go so far as to say that I think an object is Castle Peak itself in the role that it had in American conservation history with Cecil Anderson. That is not a formal object, but I would pitch it as one. But nevertheless, it has been well received in the administration, but the key thing is that the monument has not yet been through a political process. If it is to become an actual monument and go through a proclamation process, I can tell you for sure there will be a political process, and it will probably shrink, but it might not shrink a lot. And it is our advocating of an ambitious monument proposal in Idaho that has caused some consternation with certain Idaho stakeholders. It's probably not breaking a state secret to suggest that Idaho is not super fond of the current president of the United States. There's a great deal of animosity there. And it goes all the way down, unfortunately, to oftentimes local animosity towards U.S. Forest Service and BLM offices, line offices. And these are sort of tense times. And some of the pressure from Custer County or the Farm Bureau or the Cattlemen's Association or a number of other groups has been turned from the federal government to the delegation saying, we don't want this to happen. We really don't want this to happen. And very noteworthy piece is two things sort of happened at the same time. This was in the fall of last year. Mike Simpson told me that he was going to make another run at it. And that was no surprise at all, because I know this guy well. I know his feeling about his job title. He is a legislator. Legislators legislate. He is a senior member of the U.S. House. He's close friends with John Boehner, the Speaker. He's a cardinal, which means he's a subcommittee chair on appropriations. He's got a lot of power. And if he were to turn his back on something he had worked for that long on, I would have been more surprised by that than that he was going to try again. So he told me he was going to make a push And then at a dinner where he was speaking to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act in September of last year in Washington, D.C., a dinner that had several hundred people in attendance, and there was only one Republican elected office holder, and that was Mike Simpson. That Mike Simpson cares enough about wilderness and cares about this stuff that he came as the only member of the U.S. Congress from the Republican Party and spoke. Is a noteworthy thing, but that night he had a conversation with John Podesta, then in the White House, and he asked John Podesta, and I was standing this close to this conversation, and he asked Podesta for 6 months. Once the Congress starts, he wants 6 months grace period to be able to try again. And Podesta said, I think we can do that. There was a clear recognition for Simpson, however, that Boulder White Clouds is on the White House list. I can say with some confidence that the Boulder White Clouds is on the White House list, but I will also say with confidence that in the 16 monuments that they have done thus far, 3 of which were just last week, in many cases, it is because Congress has not delivered the goods. And here you have an opportunity where the local member of Congress and the majority party is saying he's going to make a go. So in good faith, the administration says, you bet, go for it. The next key development was in December, right before the holiday break, where Senator Jim Risch, not known for his wild wilderness advocacy and liberalism, walked into Simpson's office by himself. And if you know Mr. Risch, it's very important that you note that it was him solo as opposed to a staff emissary or something like that. He is his own guy. If he decides he's playing, it's about him. It's not about his staff. So anyway, he walked into Simpson's office and said, we got to get this. You know, I'm getting a lot of pressure. We need to work together and pass a bill. And that is a lot different than Mike Simpson saying he's going to make a run. So since that point, Mike Simpson has been traveling the state, working with a variety of people, and doing a fair bit of the sausage making that is typically done in committees and in the legislative process, and doing it in advance, doing it almost in real time, almost publicly, because a fair number of these drafts have been on their website as they've been moving along. And so he is crafting a bill that he believes Jim Risch will support, and that the key stakeholder groups of Idaho that really don't want a monument to happen will support. Motorized recreation, cattlemen, Farm Bureau, all these different groups. I can't say whether they've supported him or not. I believe they said they will not oppose. And what I believe is also going to happen is Mike Simpson is going to introduce his bill in the next day or two. I believe that Senator Jim Risch will be introducing a companion bill within the next week or two, and they're going to try to get it done within a 6-month window that is already getting close to 2.5 months done. It will be tough. Last week, I met with the Undersecretary of Agriculture while he was in town, and we talked White Clouds. We talked the process of how, if Congress fails, how we move this thing forward. So the pressure from the monument, I can tell you, is for real. The interest of the delegation is real. So it's interesting to sort of see sort of where they are right now. The differences, I think, are important between these two things. One is the wilderness bill is all about capital W wilderness and the constraints placed on land. I call it the gold standard land protection, but it is based on the 1964 Wilderness Act, and it is much less encompassing than some of what can be described in a national monument kind of discussion. It is a smaller footprint. It is a tighter constraint. Only Congress can designate wilderness. A national monument can protect wilderness character, but it cannot designate wilderness with a capital W. And that is a term of art. And I'm talking with the lawyers that would understand this far better than I, but we have worked with some of the best folks in the field that include former solicitors of interior, agriculture, to help figure out how we can protect the wilderness character through a national monument designation. And how to mirror some of the things that were in the original Simpson bill. Things like voluntary retirement of grazing allotments and things like that. But how to do some of the things that have been in discussion for all these years and get it done in the wilderness bill. The really key difference between the Simpson bill that I expect to see introduced in the next couple of days and what we have worked and supported for the last decade is that it's a lot smaller. It has been trimmed back in a number of places, and I would say trimmed back for entirely political purposes, to get the least opposition in Idaho or the greatest amount of support. The motorized recreation community, very importantly, I believe is supported. I mean, I don't know this, but I believe is supportive of Simpson's current proposal. That is a huge leap forward politically. And they have communicated that to Senator Risch. Folks from the production side of things, Farm Bureau, cattlemen's, folks like that, they will never support wilderness because it's just against their ideological frame as a mission, but they're not probably going to oppose. So Simpson is finding himself moving a bill that has been through his initially a very challenging political process to create something that he thinks is going to be just good enough for me, just good enough for the Idaho Conservation League, just good enough for the Sierra Club, just good enough for the Wilderness Society, that we feel good about it, or good enough about it, and deals with all the challenges of Idaho politics. And I think it's really admirable work. I think it's remarkable. Do I support it? No. And the reason I don't support it is because I don't think it's going to pass. And this is where, brings us up to looking forward a little bit. This Congress that has been impaneled in the November election is not friendly to things like wilderness bills. It is not friendly to a lot of things related to the environment, and it's particularly not friendly to the administration right now. There was the hope that some spirit of bipartisanship and comedy would come forward, but thus far it has not, and I don't blame them for it. I mean, Congress is a mess. It's got the lowest approval rating since they've been recording such things, and they deserve every bit of it. Republicans, Democrats, all of it. Pox on their whole house. So it's, so which is why I think a monument is the way to go. Because the way that happens is literally, by law, the president could write on a cocktail napkin, draw a map, and sign it, and it's done. Now, that's not how it will happen, but it's not quite that simple anymore. It's kind of how Teddy Roosevelt used to use it, but it's a much simpler process. I think the greatest challenges that Simpson faces are the leadership of his own party. I believe we can find the Democratic support in Congress. I think he will have trouble with his new chairman of resources, Mr. Rob Bishop from Utah. He will have trouble with energy and natural resources on the Senate side. That will be up to Jim Risch. Jim Risch has just had an election. He's in his second term. He's reasonably well respected, but he's actually never moved legislation. He has never worked something very challenging through his own committee, let alone something that the way Congress usually works is you have, especially these days, because they can't pass bills, so they'll bundle bills, and they'll take something that's a little bit controversial and hook it onto an appropriations thing, or hook it onto a defense thing, or something that must pass. Well, I think what I would expect in this particular case is this is a pro-environment in the view of some people bill. There's an objective to keep it clean. I think it will be attached to a bitter pill on the environment. For instance, another Keystone Pipeline bill or something like that. So, or a NEPA reform bill or an ESA reform bill, and those kind of things. So I think that the odds of it being attached to something further down the legislative process, quite in opposition to the Idaho folks, is pretty high. So the reality is I have great respect for Congressman Simpson. I have great respect for the rest of the delegation if they do in fact get on board. But I just think the challenges of the U.S. Congress are so great that it has a long shot of passing. Now, if I didn't have Plan A, the monument effort, I'd be leaning into this as hard as I can and doing everything I can to pass it. But the great news is we do have an alternative. And There are some concerns from folks that the monument is more expansive, it's bigger, and that you can't trust the Obama administration and all this other stuff. But what I am very convinced about is I've traveled all around the region. I've talked to every interest group I possibly can. And unlike the Simpson process where he did all that talking, in the monument process, I've been part of all that talking. We can create a monument that reflects Idaho's values. We can create a monument that reflects Idaho's access, agricultural issues, water rights issues, all the different things that really make Idaho folks stand up and take notice. I'm very confident a monument can encompass. My concern is that if the legislative process drags on beyond this 6 months and that there is this delay, it becomes a delaying tactic. And as it becomes a delaying tactic, I can promise you that the national environmental community will lean into this monument like none other. It will become the walking out the door litmus test of the Obama administration on monuments. I'm quite confident of this. What I'm also confident is if it goes that long, it will become a monument that is less driven by Idaho values and more driven by national values. The management plan that would result, I would like to see begin to be implemented by this administration because they will help write the proclamation. And it'll more closely reflect what I have had conversations with. So I don't want it to drag until the last months of the Obama administration. If the legislation is going to fail quickly, make it clear, and move on, and move on with a monument. So I wrote all these notes and I barely look at them, but it's I'll close with just going back to the place again. I hope I don't know how long we have, so I hope we have time for a good amount of questions. But as I said about the place, it is really a remarkable spot. It's the entire watershed of the East Fork of the Salmon River. It's some of the most remarkable salmon and steelhead spawning. It's one of the only places in the lower 48 where you have an unprotected chunk of roadless country that has both summer and winter migratory wildlife habitat. They don't leave in the winter. You know, it's all there. You have a really interesting ranch history with East Fork of the Salmon River, and these are folks that I've grown to respect a great deal over the years. There's some really interesting folks, and they have a lot of binds related to endangered species habitat that runs right through their base property, and a lot of them want to be bought out. It's a voluntary thing, and they want to do that, and we have raised millions of dollars to help facilitate that. But we have to have an authorizing bill in Congress, or we have to have a monument to be able to do that. So for a lot of different reasons, getting this job done is the right thing. And it's a really special place. A lot of interesting people care about it. And I'll just end with something, just paraphrasing Congressman Simpson when he's asked about it. He says, I don't know if my bill's going to pass or a monument's going to happen, but I promise you one of two things is going to happen. Within the next year, it's going to be a wilderness area or it's going to be a national monument. And I feel, he strongly believes that, and I believe that in a stronger way than I ever have in the 30 years I've been dabbling with this. So it's an exciting time for Idaho, and I think it's an important moment.
Thank you.
Sort of rambling all over the place.
No, that's great.
So any questions? Any piece of what I was saying you'd like me to burrow into a little bit more?
I mean, to me, the idea of this being such a issue for Simpson is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
When did he start going to the boulders and white clouds? Was this a place he grew up going to, or is this a more recent?
He started going there as a Boy Scout. And that is pretty common, actually. The White Clouds is a common overnight destination for Boy Scout troops. He's from Blackfoot, and it's a common destination for the Boy Scout troops from that side of the state. It's easy access. So he went there the first time that way. He went to Redfish a lot. He just sort of knows the landscape, and as a political animal, he certainly tracked the Asarco, Caesar Landress thing. But really what got him going was the political challenge that all these other people had failed. And he was now the member of Congress. It was in his third month, as a member of Congress, that he said he wanted to try to get this done. And I've had this conversation with him where it was sort of like, do you think that was a mistake? Because it's kind of defined his career in a lot of ways. And I think it's because it's been so hard, and it's been so divisive at various times, I think he was thinking it was a mistake until he defeated his primary opponent by 20 points last primary. Then he realized, you know, I got people out here that back me up. But it was the second year he was working on it that he did his first trip with his staff. His chief of staff has climbed to the top of Castle Peak. I haven't done that. So it's the depth of commitment is pretty high.
Rick, what's a quick compare and contrast on, say, Oahe Initiative versus Boulder White Cloud? Because you talked about the long struggle Simpsons had. Why? I mean, is there any way you can look at what was different with Crapo and the Oahe that were able to put something together and get it passed through Congress, and yet so far still stalemated on the Boulder White Cloud?
One of the unique things about the Oahe, and you know the country well, but one of the interesting things about the Oahe is those areas don't have trails per se in them. They're wild, truly untrammeled places, except by generations of ranchers and the canyoneering enthusiasts and the few folks that have boated some of the boatable pieces. It didn't have the kind of constituency, well-developed constituencies. The White Clouds, you know, I've talked with dirt bikers that have showed me pictures of as toddlers sitting on the handlebars of their dad's dirt bike on Germania Creek. You know, there's multi-generation use of all kinds in the White Clouds. And one of the interesting things about the White Clouds that's different about the Oahe, access to a lot of that Oahe is really hard. Access to the White Clouds is really easy. It's much bigger than the Sawtooths, but in one afternoon you can get to the center of the White Clouds because the road access is so good. So it's where it'll take you a couple days in the Sawtooths. So I think that's one of the challenges. I have friends that will disagree, but I think the fact that it's on national forest lands that the White Clouds is just adds to the controversy. People really loved in the Oahe that people were coming together, but they actually had no intention of ever going there. It was a magic piece of collaborative. Idahoans, people are hungry for people coming together and getting stuff done. But I will say that the catalyst for that conversation that led for an 8-year conversation based on all the bombing range stuff that you know well, but we had a pretty major national monument campaign in the Oahe Canyon at the close of the Clinton administration. We almost made that a national monument. We scared the blazes out of that.
You're like the last one cut, essentially.
Yes, we were the last one. That almost happened as Clinton was walking out the door. And our proposal, in the words of the head of CEQ, our proposal for the Oahe was very ambitious. Our monument proposal was the entire county. There was no subtlety whatsoever. It included the towns, it included private ranches, it included everything. And so after we finished and they realized how close we had gotten, Fred Grant, who was the ringleader for a lot of the Oahe, he called us up and said, we got to meet. And he said, you know, we, the Republicans, we have the White House, and this was the election that was decided by the Supreme Court. We have the White House, we have the House, we have the Senate, we have the governor, we have our entire congressional delegation, we have the state legislature. And he smiled and he goes, I think we feel comfortable that we can talk to you. And partisan things would change over the next 8 years, a whole bunch, in all different ways. But we began a conversation that was the Oahe Initiative. That really was a remarkable gathering of people. But it started with a monument. And in this case, we have a catalyst of a monument that is leading to probably the greatest prospect the Simpsons had of passing his bill, at least at the start of the legislative process. I mentioned when we almost passed it at the end. You know, so how far they get, we'll see. But I think the monument again has proven to be a catalyst for very creative and very serious conversation. I think a lot of people with the Oahe, a lot of the rest of the country didn't care. You know, it's BLM land. They cared about some of the compromises we were putting together, but they're sort of like, yeah, whatever, it's BLM land. And they didn't think we would succeed. So a lot of the national constituents were just sort of, yeah, whatever. The national folks, the committee staff, the other groups, they get pretty excited about Forest Service lands for reasons that don't entirely make sense. Other stuff?
Well, I have one more then. It just came to me while you were talking. What's in your main presentation? What's the chance that, albeit small, that you somehow end up with both? And what, like a wilderness designation, some version of Simpson's bill, and that for some reason you've created so much momentum and energy that the process still keeps going forward on the monument, and you sort of have this wilderness within a larger overarching monument. Right?
That's actually a good question, and as folks that are practitioners of law, it'd be something for you to watch. This will be the sort of insider baseball thing that might happen. Not that that will happen, but there will be concern that that will happen. The monument is a discussion created entirely on the basis of Congress failing to do its job. If Congress does its job, I, as a leader of the environmental, whatever you call it, will say, we did the job, let's move on, we have other things to do. I think it would be in bad political form, it would be bad for other things we work on. This is not the only thing ICL works on. It would really harm our credibility in long-term work to do a double dip here. Environmentalists are always accused of moving the goalpost. Our goalpost is permanent protection of the White Cloud and Boulder Mountains. If we gain that through a wilderness bill, however compromised it is, the job is done. And I will say that to anybody. Now, I think there will be a trust but verify discussion with certain members of Congress. I mentioned that this could be attached to something that is a bitter pill that would lead to either a fight from Democrats or a veto or something like that. I think there may be an effort to link an anti-antiquities piece to this. And if it's to this place, that might be okay. If it's to the counties, you might start getting some opposition. If it's to the state, it will be vetoed. It just will be. You might not know, but when they created the monument that led to the park in Grand Tetons, Wyoming has a permanent restriction on antiquities. And that's not been good for Wyoming, and it's not good for the law, and it's not good for executive powers, and this particular president I know would veto it. So, but it's a good question. I have had other people raise it because the wilderness is shrunk and the monument talks about other things that people are really interested in. I mean, the historic stuff, the native cultural sites, there's a whole bunch of cool things that the monument has discussed. And so there is some interest, and I just spray cold water on it because I just think it's the wrong political move. It'd be too much to. The White Clouds are important, but they're not worth burning up the capital that our organization or other organizations need to use for other things well into the future. We really care about our relationships with people in Idaho, including people we disagree with. There you go.
Wow, thank you so much.
Anyone on the phone? Questions?
Well, it's a pleasure to visit with you. It's as you can tell, it's something that I kind of care about. It has been a kind of talk about how the Spotted Owl for me was my graduate school, and the relationships I had and the kind of experiences that I had as a sort of rabble-rouser conservationist from Idaho that then went to play in the majors, so to speak. You know, it really got I met presidents, they do my name. I mean, it was sort of a crazy time. And, but this has been sort of, my continuing legal education, my CP, continuing political education, has been the White Clouds. Someday it will be a piece of our history that I think, if we do our job well, we'll be very proud of. And but in a time where not just our legislator, but our senior senator is now talking about state takeover of public lands. Mike Crapo was saying he supports it now. When these kind of ideas are becoming mainstream, I really believe that Idaho can do better. I believe that we need to be able to prove we can protect these places and do it in a way that complements Idaho's conservative values. We can do that, but it takes work on my part. It takes stretching. It takes some elasticity, but it takes elasticity on everybody's part. But if you get these things done and you move forward, you release a pressure valve, political pressure valve, and that's good for everybody. Idaho needs to be able to prove it can do this stuff. And the fact that we've not passed a bill for national forests since Frank Church was senator is ridiculous. There are many, many places, Scotchman Peak and south side of Sandpoint, Long Canyon in Boundary County, the Secesh or Needles and the Payette, Mount Bora, places that border Yellowstone National Park. These are all things in Idaho that should be protected in a stronger way than we have. But we have to prove it's possible. And the White Clouds, for me, was a place that we thought we could initiate it. It didn't have timber. The mining conflict was pretty much done. And the fact that it's taken so bloody long is crazy. It's become a symbol of something that it extends beyond what it is. And we should just put a bow on it, call it good, and get it done. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you guys all for coming. That was so awesome. And thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
We know officially adjourned.
Yes.
What did you do with your gavel?
My gavel is from like some cheap high school days, and I never got a gavel.
Andrew don't need a gavel. You got it.
Oh, of course, I like it. I saw your struggling face, but I didn't know what you were struggling with.
Oh, you did? Yeah. Oh, that's why I Yeah. But it was still a great experience.
Oh.
I know.
I wanted to ask you about the same thing here in the East.
Yeah.
Not really.
It's actually
How you doing, Peter?
Myself going, I'm just having one of those days where I'm in my office, I'm like flipping pancakes.
Yeah.
And when we finish that pancake, like, oh, I gotta flip that one.
Yeah.
And those,
Days like that, right?
I'm popped through a lot of matters very fast.
Yeah. Well, it depends on folks sometimes.
Yeah. There was days you want to head down for 8 hours straight, one thing a day where it's more three, 4 things before I get back.
Yeah.
And keep burning the grill. Thank you. I guess it's the moment you feel a little bit, you want to stop. It's going to be lost. I kind of, that's right. I must have been wrong.
I know that my dad's speaking.
Yeah, really close. I was, when I got into Hudson River. I worked on that. But then he left. Literally from summer.
The animosity is not necessary.
You know, in that first one, I got convinced that she's back in us. So anyway, so I spent the winter, and then I figured out. So it's, so I was sort of geared up into that.
I'm like, it has nothing to do with that.
You really just captured.
Yeah.
And I realized
It was really like.
it's kind of like.
Yeah, he was like, rested one. He was like, I wasn't expecting a
Sort of
PhD
funny.
student. Right. Very
Except for the-
And I got kind of like, I got like, I was right.
I love politics. I would love to. And so,
Uh-oh. And then I got it. Like Liz, if he could.
I work for the.
Remember that?
Was it-
And I didn't.
Okay, I was gonna ask that, how much
John.
is it? A little bit, I was just like, total long-time training.
most of it, and it's been, I've had some really some.
Well, I mean, in terms of, personal.
Right, right. You have to
Has
do the same
been-
thing once.
I work very closely with the young kids.
Yeah.
There's a
It was
lot of
very hard, but it's
bigger
like,
leaders in my
You're
life.
saying it's been
I mean, so Ted Frank, if you were almost.
And they was the fear and the
It's
It's like,
like,
yeah, it's like, yeah, it's just like.
And then,
Like, I've never seen this. Question. It's like.
Don't have it.
He's really sort of like showing you what it's like.
And I watched
I'm always
really.
He's not an expert.
And make
You
it
get-
exactly. I could do it now. Just sit inside.
It was.
At the computer,
an
out of chair.
It wasn't comfortable.
It
Yeah.
was one
It's like, that's a whole
presentation,
different
make a presentation, I thought I was but I actually, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or something that I believe it was like so really, I think that was, because it was so.
So it's the intimacy of it.
Well,
is
yeah,
really-
you know, when,
Right, yep.
That to me.
Alana Riddell, who I guess is the transitional.
You're doing stuff.
They, it was my understanding, I don't think this is happening.
I all disagree, and I all want to get that.
Like one of them.
Yeah.
Like they're all long committee.
I love it.
And it was.
And what he said was.
That's
Okay.
good.
So it's very interesting. But it had to-
Wasn't what I wanted.
Cause then he was asking for technology. Okay, you all like pushing hard on us and like keep slamming us. And so now we're just putting this, like they did trade table.
Well, so I,
Which is like when you take.
I've been in the Boulder
Not
White
gonna
House
tell
a little bit, but I'll never forget, I just kind of want
So
to.
I would
Yeah,
imagine.
where I was doing a backpack.
If that's happened, that's how.
And, you know, so that was like the destination, and that's all I was thinking about.
Yeah. Cause I mean, the truth is like.
I could just stop here.
This is
gorgeous.
I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it wasn't like
It's like I mentioned, we got some. A lot of them, low it's basically.
Like-
It was Carol Karen and stuff.
Yeah.
It was that fascinating. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
I didn't,
that.
I was
It's
not
like
like
that.
that, like I introduced myself. I introduced myself.
It's fascinating, like.
Yeah.
They already, I need to get up.
And I also thought, guy, showing up in one of our meetings, there was a whole bunch of
Like,
things, like, on that spectrum.
So,
If I hadn't been to one y'all, I honestly,
the whole issue of mountain bikes.
because if that was my first only meeting, I don't even know that, because it was so,
Bad access.
and he did such a, I mean, he
Only
did
have
such a good job at this, and to have that
And
kind of,
that's what we all.
I was just surprised.
Anyway, like I wrote him about apology.
Yeah. So it seems to be that. For me, I think a lot of concessions. It's pretty challenging.
And yet I know.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see you.
I understand. I know.
So with the wilderness having a smaller footprint, it's not like there's no more mountain biking.
Exactly. Oh.
Yeah. There was, there's no more streams trail that's
Where?
big.
Oh, yeah.
With that,
There's really just two trails that would be significantly impacted. and they are neat.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it's, I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you, I hear a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. It's so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy it. Thank you.
Cheerio.
See ya.
Yeah. Thanks for lining that up.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that. Yeah, it's wonderful. And like to get people, hey, now you agree. It's been
Have we
years.
met?
I think we met. I'll tell you
Because
when we met.
from like,
At Brian Hurlman's birthday party. Like
Yes.
4 years ago.
Yes, you're right, we did.
Yes.
Wow, I'm
we
really
did.
impressed that you remember.
No, I always remember, I saw somebody, actually last night. And she was like, I don't think we met in like, and she's a prosecutor